It is 7 o'clock on Thursday, September 14th, 2023. And this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Town of Ridgefield Inland Wetlands Board. In attendance, we have Carson Fincham, Chris Phelps, Alan Pilch, myself, Susan Baker, staff members Artie Paranjape and Caleb. Sorry, Caleb. Anyway, as this is a public hearing, we will ask Caleb to please read in documents received since last time before we get started.
Yes. Okay, so we have the 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual, Amy's Zemba resume, extension letter dated August 24th, 2023, correspondence 69 in total, site plan dated September 8th, 2023, drainage report dated September 7th, 2023, Land Tech response to Stephen Danzer memo, and Steve Trinkus review dated September 13th, 2023. We also have documents that have been uploaded starting at 5:20 today. Richfield MLS rentals as of 8/30/2023, 830G Affordable Appeals List 2022, 27 Abbott PowerPoint presentation dated 8/24/2023, another 27 Abbott PowerPoint presentation dated 8/24/2023, 27 Abbott Avenue previous approval versus approval proposal exhibit, comment response letter to Artel Engineering, comment response letter to the commission, comment response letter to Steve Trinkus. I just uploaded Artel's review dated 9/14/2023. Also downstream defend dated 11/13/2007, and then Canadian ETV versus TFS Hydro International dated September 2016. That's it.
Okay, for the record, we've been joined by Tracy Miller and David Smith as of 7:02. And those documents received after close of business were not put in time for the public to have had time to review them. We still do have to accept them because we can accept things up and during the meeting. However, I'm assuming from the nature of most of them that they are going to be shared at the meeting, and just want to make it clear that those are documents that were received after close of business today. And Tim Bishop has just joined us as of, still says 7:02 here. So I think that's everyone. And I would like to I guess at this point, open it to the applicant to present answers to questions from the board at the last meeting. And then after that, we will have comments from the board, and then we can go to the public. This is the absolute last meeting for the public hearing to be open. So at the very least this evening, we will be closing the public hearing. Depending on the hour that happens, we might start a discussion, or we might feel that it's better to put the discussion off till the following meeting. So all that said, Mr. Klein, would you like to start?
Sure. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. For the record, my name's Jay Klein, attorney with Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy, here on behalf of the applicant. And Chairwoman Baker, you took the words right out of my mouth. We've spent many of our summer Thursdays together these past several months reviewing this application. And no matter how badly we all want to continue the discussion after today, this is the last day that we have to review this important project. So we want to, reiterate what we've said during other sessions, which is not just only thanking your staff and all of you on the board for hearing this, but we also want to thank and recognize the neighbors who have spent many summer evenings with us, sharing their comments regarding the project. We have again Andy Soumalides, our project engineer, and Brian Carey, our environmental expert, both here to address the comments that were brought up towards the tail end of the last meeting, and I think have some responses to comments that were uploaded, I guess, since the last meeting as well. And then, of course, we'll be prepared to respond to any new comments, both from all you folks on the commission and any of the neighbors or other members of the community who are in attendance here this evening. So with that said, I will turn things over to Andy Soumalides, who will begin our portion of the presentation this evening.
Good evening. Andy Soumalides, Principal and Professional Engineer with Lantec out of Westport. I'm just going to run through the latest revisions that hopefully address all your guys' concerns. And then I don't know if Mr. Verbicus is present tonight, but some of his comments, I think, at least I require some clarity on, and I'm more than happy to address. So if he could also speak sooner in the presentation, maybe after mine, and kind of run through his comments, I can maybe piggyback near the end of our presentation with responses to him, as long as he provides some clarity.
Caleb?
Dinus is at another meeting right now. He said that if he can, he'll try to make it.
Okay, then I'll try and address his comments as best as I can. Some I just didn't understand. Okay. So at our last meeting, we went through and discussed revisions to the plan. We further revised the plan, and I'm just going to start with the commission's concerns. One of the concerns from a stormwater perspective was getting the proper treatment, the TSS removal. The deep hooded sumps, 4-foot sumps, and infiltration Coltech system provide the 80% TSS removal required by both, the town of Richfield manual as well as the 2003 water quality manual, 2004, I'm sorry. What we did to beef that up even more was we installed a hydrodynamic separator, the downstream defender. What that is basically a manhole structure that has a swirl chamber in it. As stormwater comes through that system, it filters out fine sediments to get 100% TSS removal. That's what those systems are designed for. So exceeding the 80% required, as well as removing oils, gases, nitrogen, and the such. So after you go through the treatment train, you're getting 98% removal of nitrogen, 100% removal of solids. And again, this is more of a belt suspenders approach. I just want to mention that the previous design met the standards. This is just beefing that system up even more so. So we did add that hydrodynamic separator to get 100% removal of those TSS pollutant loads. Another comment or question was the type of fill material to be used on the site. That's really going to come from a geotechnical engineer who hasn't been engaged yet, but we did put in here, clean structural fill will be supplied below buildings. And then you're going to have some process aggregate, clean process aggregate essentially, below the pavement areas. So on our detail, let me just fast forward to our detail. We're showing that it's going to be process aggregate below the paved areas and below of 12 inches to 60 inches. So you're looking at, crushed stone aggregate. It's a material that can compact, that you can get 98% compaction in order to have a nice smooth driveway. So that's what we're proposing for the fill areas below the buildings and also under the paved areas. Another one of the concerns was the bathtub effect or mounding effect with our drainage system sitting in between impermeable concrete, retaining walls, and how is the water going to drain out? Once it does go through the infiltration system, it's going to create, a bathtub effect within the system. So we've added these additional cross sections, further detailing them. And what we did was we went from a concrete wall with impermeable liner behind it to a block retaining wall. The purpose of this was the block retaining wall can have shallow footings. A concrete wall would have to go below the frost depth with a footing, which is 42 inches below the existing grade, which is this line here. You'd have to go deeper into the existing grade with that, which would, impede the water. What we did in our previous approval to remedy that was basically put the weep holes within that concrete wall. Your third-party reviewer was okay with that and wasn't concerned with mounding, but we still heard concerns from the commission regarding the mounding. So this concrete block wall, you basically bury one block, and it's like an 8-inch block that goes into the existing grade. So you can see it sits a lot higher than you being down here with your footing. This now allows the free passage of the water, not impeding the natural flow of that water going beneath the wall and out towards the wetlands. So we remedied that by doing a block wall. There's also drainage behind the wall. I think one of the comments from Mr. Verbicus was that this may short circuit now the drainage system. I think we have ample separating distance from that wall, and also that footing drain for that wall is much higher than the bottom of our system. So I don't see how we would short circuit that system, because it would go through the required media, get the proper treatment, and then travel its way towards the wetlands. So I think we have that proper separation, the proper elevations to not short circuit that. Another question or comment was the alternatives. We submitted alternatives, and I'm just going to run through them again with you. This is the approved site plan from this commission. The approval was to maintain that existing dwelling in the front, a driveway that goes to the rear to service a new multifamily building in the rear. That building is 25 feet off the wetlands. As you can see on this plan, there's no proposed buffer. There's no proposed stormwater infrastructure. There are some pine trees that are planted in between, I presume, for screening from the neighbor to the north. But again, no stormwater infrastructure proposal, no buffer plantings, and more encroachment towards the wetlands. This is an approved plan that could be built today through this commission. Understood that it needs a building permit, but no further review from this commission. We also presented another alternative that kept all the work outside the 100-foot regulated area. This again would be more of an apartment style building where you drive underneath with parking underneath the building. That would be 1 story, and then 2 stories above that. You can get 28 spaces here, probably more density. Again, this is another alternative. We didn't flush out all the details in terms of grading, drainage, and the such, but we feel we can keep a building outside the regulated area with this type of proposal. I think it would increase the density and probably not fit in with the character of the neighborhood. This exhibit compares that previously approved plan to what we're proposing. All we're showing here is really the impervious surfaces. You have that existing dwelling to remain in blue here. Outlined here is the limits of that asphalt driveway. And then behind here, you can see the limits of our driveway. in our building, the driveway encroaches closer to the wetlands that's currently approved, and the building encroaches closer to the wetlands that's currently approved. We could theoretically get this, put a building in between the two buildings and get the same density we require and move forward with an application with not having closer impact to the buffer than was previously approved, with no buffer in between, quite frankly, because there's no plantings proposed and no stormwater improvements. Yes, perhaps when we go through zoning, we would need to include some stormwater improvements, but through this commission, it was approved as such.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sumalides, which of, you presented, I think, originally 3 different alternatives. Was that alternative one you just showed us? I don't think we had seen that as a suggestion before.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, no, the one where you show, nope.
This
This
is
one.
this is just a comparison. This is
Right,
not
but
an
this is a
alternative.
new graphic, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
Yes, this
just
is
wanted
just
to
a
clarify that this is an absolutely new graphic.
that was
And-
uploaded today, correct?
Okay, so no one had a chance to look at that.
Sure. This is just a
If
comparison.
all of you in your presentation tonight could specify when you show us something that came in after hours today, that would
This
be
is the only
helpful.
exhibit that came after hours. The rest were response to comments in
Okay,
written form, which we are
okay,
doing
because I thought
verbally as
there were
well.
some PowerPoints. Were those all presented earlier?
Yes,
This is Brian Carey for the record. Those were PowerPoints that were presented during previous meetings. And I think they were actually uploaded previously. My apologies, the record is so large now. I just wanted to make sure it was in there, but those PowerPoints were previously uploaded.
Okay. And just as a point to make here, I don't know that if you have an approval for something in the wetlands like this, that you could just go back and add to this approval another building. I
well,
don't
if
see
we,
how that works because the previous board would not have had a chance to see the whole picture that you were planning to do.
sure, but if we build this today,
Yes,
then
that you
propose
can
a-
do.
right, propose a new building outside the 100-foot wetland regulated area, which is in here. Would it need to come before your commission is my understanding.
I don't know. I'd have to check with council on that one.
Right. That's where I was getting at with it.
Okay.
So, yeah, we would,
If
Ma-
there's a
ma-
potential impact adverse to wetlands or water courses, we have the authority to regulate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Regardless of upland review distance.
Ready, okay, just didn't want things to get confusing, so I just
Sure.
want to make sure
Yeah,
we're
and this
clarifying
isn't-
anything
this
that's
is our
new.
existing site plan with that alternate that you've already seen. So this is not a new alternate, this is just an exhibit showing a comparison. That's
Oh,
all for
thank you.
clarity,
Okay,
mostly for
thank you.
clarity.
Okay,
Um,
please,
and I think lastly, from the commission, in terms of stormwater, I would say, because I think Brian's gonna touch on some of the other aspects, was the snow removal. Which was a very valid concern. So what we did was, as always, we said this area here would be the snow removal area. But what we didn't have, which we did add, was a trench drain along the top of this wall now. So during snow melt, all that snow melt is still gonna get the same treatment as you would during a rain event. That's typically not likely what happens when people carve out snow removal areas. But in this instance, we thought it was important to add that trench drain. This trench drain is connected to this catch basin. This catch basin goes to this manhole. That goes through the swirl chamber, the hydrodynamic separator, through the infiltration system. So during a snow event, just like a rain event, you're gonna get the same proper treatment of that TSS removals, the oils, gases, nitrogen, and so on and so forth. So I think that was all the comments from the commission. I will now
May I
address-
ask one more question?
Sure.
Just since we were on the subject of alternatives, I don't think you showed us alternative 2.
Maybe not tonight. I might have presented it at a different one. Is what you're saying?
Yes, and I thought if we we're gonna look at alternatives, maybe we should look at them all one more time.
What was alternative 2?
It had a bigger apartment
Mm.
building at the end of the
Oh, that
row.
was the one that was, yeah, that was the one that. Let me pull that up. I think Brian has that as part of his. Is that okay that he shares that?
I
with-
can share the screen right now, Andy. I
Okay.
have it up.
Go ahead. Pull that one up.
Sorry, it's a little bit. But this was a denser proposal as far as apartments. It was a mix of apartments and townhouses.
Mhm.
So there's been multiple alternatives that we've worked through. Probably more than what we're even listing now, just based on our response to comments received from the third party review and staff, but this was one of the ones that was first presented. So initially we presented alternative 1, which was the approved plan. Obviously, always an alternative is the no build scenario, which, you know, it's just maintaining the house. We went through, I think in the record about how that wasn't found feasible or prudent. This was alternative 2 that we had looked at prior to submitting to the commission. This was one of the alternatives that was shown based on response to comments from members of the commission asking to see what development could be handled outside the 100-foot review area. And then this was a preferred alternative, but since we've kind of reworked this as well based on comments received by, again, third-party review and the commission. So Andy, I'll let you show again the preferred alternative. I would say this was the preferred alternative 1A because we have updated this to identify and basically address comments that were shared to us. So the new set of plans is our preferred alternative because it does address we do think it's feasible and prudent. It addresses the concerns we've received so far from the third party review, the commission's comments, and it's a better plan working through the comments. So I'll stop sharing and Andy can bring back up his.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We did not, just for the sake of confusion, enter alternatives every time we change the plan to address comments. We'd be up to alternative, I don't know, 12 or 13 at this point. So just to keep the record straight and not that confusing, I do think we've provided alternatives to show that this does meet the preferred alternative of the applicant while being protective of wetlands.
Okay, appreciate that. And that's how we would expect it to be done. Anyway. Okay, I'm sorry to have interrupted Mr. Thumalides.
No worries. I'd like now to run through Mr. Trinkus's comments dated August 10th. I haven't seen anything based on our latest submission, but I just want to run through those and how we address those as well. The first comment was in relation to soil testing and more soil testing. So we went out there and did deep test holes in the 4 corners of the proposed system. What some of the concern was the material that was sought in this test hole here, test hole 1 here, had some fill with some miscellaneous debris in it that didn't seem suitable for belong below an infiltration system. So we did additional testing in all four corners to confirm that there is no miscellaneous debris in that fill. We furthermore did additional infiltration testing, double ring infiltrometer testing, not percolation testing, to determine infiltration rates. Those also concurred with our original results of a 1 inch and 15 percolation rate. So I think we've done some significant testing throughout the site, specifically within the limits of the underground infiltration system. So I think that addressed comments 1 and 2, which were related to deep test and infiltration testing. Comment number 3, again, related to soil testing. Groundwater elevations cannot be confirmed because there was no testing there. Well, testing was done, and the proper ground elevation, which is part of this set, was added to all of our testing here. So we confirmed the groundwater elevation, and it is shown as well as in our cross section. Cross section A has been revised. This was the cross section to determine the limits of fill. In cross section A here, you could see that where the limits of fill are. This dash line here shows existing grade. This shows finished grade. This calls out precisely where the fill is in relation to the finished grade. We have also detailed that we would strip the topsoil throughout the site and then bring up the necessary fill, obviously to get the right compaction below our paved areas. Comment 6 was in relation to the isolator row. Seemed like nobody liked that. The isolator row is a row in an infiltration system that's basically wrapped in filter fabric, and all the effluent goes in there originally and then disperses throughout the rest of the system. The isolator row helps settle out the fine so it doesn't infiltrate throughout the entire system. Nobody was a fan of that. So what we did was add that hydrodynamic separator to make sure we got all of the fines out before any of the stormwater enters into the system. Comment 7 was the weep holes. Nobody was a fan of the weep holes, it sounded like, either, other than the third-party reviewer who had no issues with our quote-unquote bathtub effect. But we did modify that again to be a modular block retaining wall now, and again with a shallow footing that is associated with those types of walls. So again, the weep holes have been eliminated. I think that answers comments 7 and 8. Comment number 9 was in relation to this catch basin bubbling out on a 100-year storm event. That didn't bubble out on our previous proposal, and it doesn't bubble out again on this proposal. So it never bubbled out from the last time we spoke. Since this comment was addressed to those plans, it didn't bubble out of there. So I think that comment was just invalid. Another comment was the footings, the type of footings that would be with a concrete wall, and how they would extend into our neighboring property. As you can see, this is again a block retaining wall. You basically stack these large blocks against each other, they taper back, and there's no footing that's required. It's basically 6 inches of crushed stone that it sits on, and then you stack the blocks above that. So there's no footing. These big blocks just act as a footing as themselves, essentially, and they're shallow footings. The other concern was the snow storage. Where we're doing the snow storage, and during a snow melt, it would go untreated into the wetlands. As I mentioned earlier, we did add this trench drain that, again, that's connected into our stormwater system that goes through the proper treatment. Comment 12 was the water quality is held at a fixed storage below the system, and we're not getting the proper treatment. We were getting the proper treatment. So I think that comment is invalid. But for belts and suspenders, we added the hydrodynamic separator. Again, that gets you 100% TSS removal based on the proprietary system, based on the manual, based on the product specification. So that has been added. So I think we got the belts and suspenders there for the treatment. Comment 13 was talking again about the drawdown of this system. Again, we disagree with that comment, and the drawdown calculations were done correctly. Comment 4 was the MS4 disconnected impervious areas. We've added some language in there to clearly spell out what the MS4 is intended for and how it's our project's 100% completely disconnected imperviouses. What that means is all of our new impervious surfaces are being captured and put into a detention system. What connected system would mean is taking all of this and connecting it directly into the town's drainage system or directly discharging it to a town's waterway system. That is not what is happening with our proposal. Our proposal, again, the proper treatment, the proper detention, the proper reduction in runoff rates. So we are meeting 100% of disconnected impervious surfaces and meeting the MS4 requirements. Again, not a requirement of your regulations, not even a requirement of the water quality manual. But it was a concern of the third-party reviewer for the from the neighbors. I wouldn't call them a third-party review, the neighbors consultants. So we addressed that. And I think the last comment was regarding silt fencing, and I think we did a good job now in the construction sequence of really spelling out how this should get constructed in terms of an ENS perspective. The last concern was at the last hearing was we're going to put in this retaining wall and there's no room to put in a silt fence. There's no room to put any protections on that side. So there is silt fence along the rear of the property. This wall, once constructed, would act as the barrier. It's a fill wall. That means you're digging down minimally to put in a footing and put in that wall, and you build that wall to its top height. After it reaches its height, then you could build in the rest of the infrastructure. As you saw in the cross section, the infiltration system sits below that. It all gets filled in. So what would happen here is the wall would act as a barrier on the northern side. You still have erosion controls on the eastern and southern boundary of the property. Double row silt fence as required. Those were the comments from the engineer's third party. I'm going to quickly run through, and I think we did at the last hearing, Mr. Verbicus's comments, which were some cleanup of the general construction notes, and this is dating August 24th comment letter. The construction notes on sheet L1 have been revised. The fill material was another comment that you've heard of earlier that we've addressed. Comment 3 was to do test holes prior to construction. We did them now. We've addressed those comments already, way before construction. So comment 3 has been addressed. Comment 4 was, have we looked at permeable pavement? I asked the commission specifically if they wanted us to explore that, and the feedback we got was we should not explore the permeable pavement. That is an option. It does help infiltrate, but it was not explored as it was not desired by the commission for us to explore that. Comment 5 was in relation to basically the geometry of the pipe bends and how they were going into the stormwater system. So we cleaned those up as well. And comment 6 was basically just showing the water lateral, which we showed connecting into the building. As stated, it's not a wetland issue, but it was a comment. The comment we received about 15 minutes ago, also not having enough time to really review it for this hearing. So this is dated September 14th. The first comment was in regards to soil testing. You heard that already earlier. The extensive testing we did for this infiltration system. Just to be clear, the manual requires one test hole. one test hole in the vicinity of this detention system. We have, I would say, 6 test holes in the vicinity of this infiltration system. Deep test holes. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as well, infiltration testing. 7 actually, infiltration testing in the vicinity of this detention system. Comment number 2 was in relation to the segmental block wall. Again, the pipe that discharges out from the segmental block wall, which is basically drainage behind a wall, is greater than 10 feet away from our infiltration system. Plus the bottom of our infiltration system is below. You can see here the crushed stone goes way below the invert of that segmental block wall. So I don't see how the water short circuits. Short circuit would be if the water went right in here and didn't get the proper treatment through the 3 feet of unsaturated soil, which you would get here. So I'm not sure where he's concerned about that. Comment 3 was the wall and drainage structure should be drawn to scale. I'm not sure where that is in relation to. He doesn't point out, so I'm not sure if it's in plan view, checks in view, or one of the details. Seems like just for clarity. Number 4, cleanouts are recommended for roof drains. More than happy to provide cleanouts at these bends to get into the roof leaders. Not an issue at all. And then comment 5 was the stormwater modeling shall be updated separately. This is the one I really had a question on. I'm not sure where he was going with this or what the question is. Proposed 8-inch diameter pipe appears to restrict flow. In our model, we are reducing the flows for all the storm events up to the 50-year storm. So I'm not sure what that comment really means, honestly. So that's the one I really needed clarity on. Our drainage system, as you heard from Mr. Verbikis at the last hearing, was sized properly, was designed properly, would provide the runoff reduction, would provide the water quality. I think what we've done here is add more belts and suspenders to it. So that's what I have as my presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Brian, unless you guys have questions right now on the stormwater issues. I'm more than happy to answer now.
Any members at this time have questions that Mr. Sumalides could speak to?
Just one clarification.
Tracy, yes.
I think the board said we were concerned about soils and permeable pavers. There wasn't clarity. There seemed to be one of the peer reviewers said that the soils couldn't handle infiltration from permeable pavers. So I think what our comment was, we wanted the engineers to figure that out. And we didn't feel like we could really say yes to that until that was resolved. So just for clarity, that was our comment. But we said we would leave that to the engineers to figure out.
Sure. Do you know who mentioned that?
I think Mr. Trinkus was concerned about the soils being able to handle the permeable pavers. So I personally didn't feel like I could recommend them until that was resolved.
Sure.
Alan?
Yes, just a question for you, Mr. Sumalides. On your drawing C-2.0, you're now showing a, I'll say, a more extensive depth of stone underneath the chambers. And looking at this section on that section BB, it doesn't appear that you would have 3 feet of unsaturated soil underneath there, which I know you just claimed there is. But looking at this section, it appears that with that thicker layer of stone, the amount of soil beneath the stone below the chambers would be much less than that. So you're not getting the 3 feet of unsaturated soil. And I think with the process aggregate as well around everywhere, surrounding it, also seems to defeat that purpose of having 3 feet of unsaturated soil, because it's really some of the fines in the soil that provide the water quality improvement. You know, traveling through aggregate material doesn't really provide that. So that's something else I think you need to address.
I would agree with that. Yes, we could amend that. We don't need that as part of the stormwater design. It's not taken into account as part of the storage volume. So we could easily amend and remove the crushed stone that's not necessary below and put that as a biomix or the such below the system. A clean soil material below the system.
Is there a reason you're replacing the soil below the system in the first place? Why you showed it this way?
Yeah, so that's topsoil. So what we're doing is stripping the topsoil. There's a thick layer of topsoil and fill there and getting into that so we could replace that with regular soil, regular clean fill.
Anyone else at this time?
We have about 19 inches or 22 inches of topsoil in this area. So it's a deep layer of topsoil that we'd like to remove and then replace that.
I do have one more question.
Tracy, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't know if you saw Mr. Trinkus's comments from September 13th.
September 13th?
Yes.
I have not.
So I wonder, Caleb, can we pull that up? I was actually concerned by his general comment B, which I don't think you've addressed.
Sure. I don't have them in front of me. I'm sorry. Somebody pulling them up or somebody reading to us?
I think Caleb is.
Yeah, I am. Sorry. Just give me a moment.
Okay. I'm assuming these are up on the portal.
They are.
Okay.
They were up there today when I looked.
B, you said, right, Tracy?
B, that's correct.
So we're citing the New Hampshire Stormwater Center now?
Well, he did.
Is that the comment you want me to address?
I do, because
Okay.
so when I read that, again, I'm a landscape architect, so I honestly didn't know what the downstream defender is. So I went online and I looked it up and I went to their website, and they also had their testing results on, or different testing results on their website, which I asked Caleb to upload. And none of the test results that I saw added up to 98%. And so I wondered if, if you can address his question here, and if you want to, you can look at the test results that the company has on their website. And it seems like a discrepancy to me, but maybe you have an answer to this. It's very confusing to me.
Sure, I'll get you an answer shortly.
Okay.
Anyone else at this point? While that's going on? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Caleb. Yeah, thanks. So I guess we're going back to Brian Carey then. Is that it?
Yeah, so I'm just going to address some other comments that were brought up by the commission, but also in a memo that was submitted by Steve Danzer, which we'd submitted responses to. I just want to hit on a couple issues, one of them being water quality, one of them being the discussion of the buffer and the plantings, the planted buffer, and then third, at the last meeting, there was some concern regarding the some of the tree protection for some of the offsite trees. So just to go through, and I'm just going to summarize quickly because I did submit into the record a response to Mr. Danzer's letter that I submitted September 18th. There was a lot of comments that were drawn from the letter that was speculative, and I just wanted to address them. The proposed project, there's been a lot of speculation to say that the project impairs or degrades the primary functions of wetlands, of the off-site wetlands. There's been nothing in the record that shows that to be the case definitively. It's been speculative. Again, we've discussed in depth about direct inputs to the wetlands that have been shown to occur in the watershed, in the existing watershed that is highly urbanized. Our project is eliminating all direct discharges from the wetland from the project site. All of the water, stormwater associated with our project is being treated through the hydrodynamic separator and through the Coltech system, and then is also going through the level spreader into what is going to be a planted riparian buffer where there exists none now. Even as discussed in the alternative one that we presented, there is no planted buffer in that alternative. The proposed development only increases the amount of impervious coverage in the 50-foot upland review area by 560 square feet. I mean, that is really the size of a small shed. It's not significant enough based on existing land use around the site, either to the north or south or to the west, that would provide any type of impacts that are not already occurring and that are not being mitigated by our planted buffer. Just going through this, based on my professional opinion as a wetland scientist, the 22-foot buffer for the project is suitable protection to maintain the existing function and values of the identified off-site wetland and water course. The decision to have a 22-foot varied upland buffer was a well-considered choice for the project based on the existing conditions. It is our professional opinion that the width of the buffer will help with the existing functions and values of the subject site. It should also be mentioned, there's been a lot of discussion about the adequacy of having any development occur within the 50 or even within the 100-foot buffer on the property. And I just wanted to note that there are several examples within the past 2 to 3 years where the commission has approved projects with basically the same intensity, where work has been done within 5 feet of wetlands. Specifically, IW 22-4, 100 Danbury Road was approved for the construction of 6 apartment-style townhouses, where work on that project was being proposed and was performed within 5 feet of the wetlands. You know, when you're determining buffer distances and widths, you know, a standard rule obviously does not apply. We did review the memo that was put into the record regarding the DEP's fisheries division. And while there is some information that is pertinent in that buffer memorandum, it is not actually completely germane to this discussion. Again, buffers need to be evaluated on a project-to-project basis. And given the existing, again, I don't mean to harp on this, but given the existing surrounding land use and the conditions that we've identified at the site, we will be making improvements to the existing site that we do feel professionally, in our opinion, will be mitigated any future short-term or long-term impacts to wetlands. That being said, I wanted to go over some comments after the last meeting where we talked about potential impacts to the tree canopy of the offsite, some of the identified trees offsite. The only large-scale tree we could find offsite was identified as this 14-inch Norway maple, and this 10-inch or 8-inch Norway maple that are basically directly behind the property from the shed. You can see this one has a bit of a lean in it, and if you zoom in further, you can see that their tree is also suffering from a bit of girdling root.
Brian, you're not sharing, Brian.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. So again, after the last meeting, we did go out based on some of the concerns we received and did look at the existing tree canopy. The only substantial trees we did notice that are directly off-site were these two Norway maples, which as you know, Norway maple is an invasive species in the state of Connecticut. We did do, as a Connecticut licensed arborist, I did review the condition of the tree. It does have girdling root, which you can see right here. There is some brush stacked up next to the tree that will be removed. But the tree is basically codominant and are susceptible to wind throw. Here's a picture we took of the same tree dating back to 2002. But as you know, Norway maples are invasive in the state of Connecticut. The drip line for the tree does come within the wall that we will be installing, but that in itself is not necessarily a problem. The critical root zone is the problem, and the way you calculate the critical root zone is by applying the formula provided here, which is basically 12 inches for every 1 inch diameter breast height. That tree being a 14-foot DBH, you're looking at critical root zone. It basically in this area, which again won't be disturbed other than hand digging. So we do not think that as a professional arborist, I do not think that will cause a problem. And truth be told, the benefits to even removing that tree on the project, Norway maple, even though it's offsite, which we can't do, would probably be more beneficial than trying to save it anyways. Norway maples, as you know, have a lot of negative impacts on the environment. One of them is to outcompete native spring ephemerals. They also tend to be heavily susceptible to wind throw, which would cause further erosion along the bank. Generally, they just outcompete natives, including sugar maples and beeches and other more beneficial species. So for the sake of the argument, the project will be protective of the tree, but I guess the question really is, do we want to be saving Norway maples? Anyways, it's not necessarily a practice that's basically carried out. I think that's all I can answer any comments, but I think that's all I have to say in response to most of Mr. Danner's comments. I think the big takeaway is that all the mitigation measures that have been developed into the project are protective of the adjacent wetlands, especially our stormwater design, the establishment of what we believe is a adequate upland buffer, and the extensive plantings we're going to do within that buffer. Furthermore, once the buffer is established, the applicant will be performing routine maintenance to make sure that no invasives are outcompeting the buffer that is being planted, and that's something that we will do on a semi-annual basis, which can be made a permit condition if chosen. So that being said, I can answer really any questions, but we really feel that all of the impacts have been mitigated, and that the project isn't any more intensive than ones that have been approved in the past by the commission in the relatively recent time frame of 2 to 3 years. and is also consistent with the surrounding watershed and the level of urbanization that we've identified. So.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Is there anyone else from your group that plans to speak this evening?
No, we were just gonna prepare for rebuttal, listen to comments, and then we would provide closing comments and answer any questions that are left.
Okay, and we're going to hear from Mr. Sumalides also. Again, I understand, and then maybe by that time, Mr. Verbikis will have been able to join us. We'll have to see if that works. Okay, so I'd like to go back.
I'm
to the
here.
board. Oh, you're here. Good, okay. Perhaps we can wrap up. Mr. Sumalides, you had a couple of questions that you wanted to ask Dinas? Mr. Verbikis?
Yes, sorry. I just had a question regarding the last comment, really. I don't know if you were here when we went through the
Yeah.
responses.
I-
You heard those?
Yes, I've been on for
Okay.
for the past 30 minutes or so.
Okay.
And yeah, so good evening for the record, Dinas Verbikis, professional engineer. Apologies for the lateness of the letter. We're down a couple of folks this well for the past week and a half. So we're trying to do our best to address everything for everyone, and well, are failing, but trying. So of the comments, I guess the one comment about the segmental block walls and the drains around it. Yeah, during the regular first flush 1.5 inch rain event, water will likely not reach the drain pipes around the wall, but I was more in line with thinking about the larger storm events where the water actually backs up into the infiltrator units. And because, I mean, we're really on the side property line, the detention system is only about a couple of feet away from that retaining wall, couple and a half, maybe 3 feet, and all the materials there. I mean, try as you may, it's probably all going to be pretty much gravelly and pervious. So you may get some water leaving the detention area via these under drain pipes. So it may be, sneaking past. Might want to look at that. The things being drawn to scale. We've got the 2-foot catch basins. I'm thinking, are they proposing little D-box catch basins? And I saw the details, and it shows standard catch basins that are going to be placed there, and they're 5 feet by 4.5 feet dimensionally, give or take. And just, I think more pictorially, you want to show the real dimensions so that when a contractor does go out, they'll have had an opportunity to think it all through and place things so that they don't become in conflict or find themselves, for lack of a better term, painted into a corner. Similarly with the trench drain. I mean, it's the trench drain itself is, it's with the concrete, it's about 2 feet wide. And we're only showing a 1-foot strip. So again, it's going to get really tight for space. And you want to be able to plan for that prior to having all the parts out on the property and then trying to make it all fit. And my fifth comment, by reworking the drainage system, and I'm grateful that you put in that the swirl concentrator. I really don't like the isolator rows, but it's so good change on your part. But in reorganizing this, you've got a couple of pipes leaving the stormwater detention system. You've got a 4-inch pipe and an 8-inch pipe, and they're routed into a catch basin. and the pipe that leaves that catch basin is an 8-inch pipe. So that will become the restriction on the stormwater outflow. So, you know, though it's modeled through those two outlet pipes, the last pipe that goes into the from the manhole into the level spreader, that's going to be the one that's going to control things, and it'll slow things down or keep the flows a little bit less than what your calculations show. But in the larger storm events, you're likely going to start backing water up higher into the system. So I would, you know, looking at it, I'm thinking, what would I do? I'd probably just go with a larger pipe leaving the manhole. And I think, you know, dimensionally or area wise, probably a 10-inch pipe would do the trick. But again, sometimes that's a forgotten element in the stormwater modeling, and in this case, it would have retained a little bit more than what you were expecting. And again, only during the larger events. I think after the once you get past the 10-year event, that's when the water starts going into that 4-inch outlet pipe. So, and those were my comments from a wetland standpoint.
Mr. Simulidis?
Sure. Now I understand.
Again, I didn't mean to spring it on you the last minute.
No, I get it. No, I understand now your comment about the 8 and the 4-inch. We had a 4-inch high level overflow out of the system into the manhole, and the 8-inch really restricts, and the model is such that, you know, it takes into account that 4-inch when it really should just be 8-inch. So you're 100% right. A 10-inch would do the trick. And no need to, you know, really, we can remove that 4-inch. In regards to the semi-ductile block, I know this was in, you know, I know you didn't have an issue, Mr. Verbicus, with the mounding. This was really the solution to that, I would say. We didn't think there was an issue either. But again, this with a shallower footing type system, we could also potentially, you know, again, structural engineers would need to weigh in on this and remove that drainage behind the wall, right? I think we could also design it in such that these walls, we don't have to, quote unquote, so short circuit it. We still do have the 3 feet of separation, I would say, to get the proper treatment and such. But I do understand a little bit your concern. The higher flows, the system fills up, what really happens? Obviously, it infiltrates down and it gets out of our piping system into the manhole and out through the level spreader. Again, we feel there's probably not a potential to short circuit it. There, you know, again, that was just our reaction, I would say, to the mounding. That was of a huge concern.
Yeah, and you know, to the commission, just again, with this solid retaining wall that was placed there, I initially had a concern with mounding behind that cast in place retaining wall, and the applicant did put in or proposed weep holes that were down below the surface of the ground, so that should any water start to migrate, it would migrate through the weep holes and not, you know, burst out onto the surface. So from my standpoint, I thought that was a viable solution to the challenge of ponding. But thank you.
Okay,
I do also have, I don't know if this is the right time to answer Ms. Miller's comment regarding the treatment.
Sure.
So the catch basins with deep hooded, you know, 4-foot sumps with hoods is 25% TSS removal. That's what the manual says. That's what you get for TSS removal. So I'm not understanding, I'm sure we'll hear from Mr. Trinkus how he came to his analysis of getting only 9%.
I'm
as
sorry.
well.
Sorry to interrupt. I
Sure.
don't know if Mr. Trinkus is actually here.
Okay.
So since he isn't here, I think it would be helpful to pull up his response again so that we can see what you're speaking to.
Sure. And maybe Mr. Verbickas can weigh in on it
Maybe.
as well.
I think that would be helpful.
Yes.
It's very confusing to me.
I
So-
can pull that up easily here, so let me just do
We're
that.
supposed to parse through this, and it's very different.
Right. I mean, Mr. Trinkus doesn't really give an analysis for the first comment. He just says it should be 9%, shouldn't be 25%. I'm not sure where he came up with that. But in my professional opinion, it's 25%. And based on the manual, it's 25%. The hydrodynamic separator, it's an inline hydrodynamic separator, which means like the stormwater flows through it with no bypass. What Mr. Trinkus is saying here, when you have something like a storm scepter, there is a bypass manhole, which means that you filter the larger storm events bypass the system, so you're only really treating the first flush. Our system is designed to take our largest storm event. So we're not even treating the first flush, we're treating the 50-year storm. A 50-year storm in our system is 1.93 CFS. The downstream defender, the 6-foot diameter downstream defender that we're speccing, can carry a flow of 8 CFS. So that's 4 times what the 50-year storm does. So we're treating the 50-year storm in line. So what he's saying here is completely false. In my opinion, my professional opinion. Mr. Verbickas can weigh in as well, and you can hear it from him. But this is, you're getting 25% with the deep sump. And when you're doing a 6-foot diameter downstream defender with with the flows we're talking about, you're getting 98% TSS removal. I mean, that's just what their specifications say. That was testing done by various agencies. I mean, I could pull it up and I can submit it for the record if you need to see it, but I'll let Mr. Verbickas also weigh in on it.
I think it would be good to see it for the record because, and maybe I was looking at the wrong thing on their website, but their specs didn't specify a 98% removal rate. So
Okay.
I would like to see something because this is
Sure.
very confusing to me.
I'll pull it up.
Mr. Verbickas, are you comfortable commenting on this?
Well, I don't have the removal rates memorized and such, but I know that there's always differences of opinion and thoughts on how much gets removed and what gets removed, and I guess it all depends on the type of sediment or sand or silt that is running through these stormwater systems or to these stormwater management systems. I've in the past looked at all of the swirl concentrator type of systems that remove, whatever claims they make to the pollutant removals, and they all vary, and all of their laboratory testing is based on their, meaning that the specific manufacturer's special mix of sediment. And again, some of the manufacturers test with a material that has less fine material, less things that are apt to become buoyant or rush through with the water. So some manufacturers are testing sand and gravel and finding 98% removal or what have you. But what we find is that the stuff that you really want to try and catch in addition to that would be the fines. and some of these products are better than others. And when I try and design, I try and do similar to what Lantec has done, and just put in a larger unit, overkill rather than try and squeak things through. Again, deep sump catch basins, I don't know the percentage of removal. But again, you find in the catch basins that there's, oftentimes sand and leaves, an occasional baseball or grass clippings. And that's the kind of stuff that stays at the bottoms of these catch basins. And I think I'm probably going to repeat myself, but we do go out to a number of condominium developments and apartment complexes where we do look at the stormwater management systems, and of course we find sediments and sands in these deep sumps or deeper, even in 2-foot sumps, they tend to work. And then you've got your Vortechnics or swirl concentrator at the end of the line before it discharges into a detention basin. And more often than not, we note that when there's a swirl concentrator kind of at the end of the line, there's no real indication of any kind of sediment or silt or anything that gets out to the detention basin or open area for further treatment or detaining things. So I think these products and means work. The total amounts that get removed, it's I'm not up to snuff on every product's removal capability. And yes, of course, when you're calculating your removal rates, let's say, for instance, we start with a 25% removal in the deep sump catch basin. So now for the next item in line for your treatment train, now you're only having the 75% of what was there going onward into for separation. So you're not, like Mr. Trinka said, it's not additive. So you're not, you don't add your percentages. What you're doing is a percent of a percent of a percent. So it's really difficult to get down to, 75 or 80 or even 90% removal rates. And we strive to get the best that we can out of it. And again, over design seems to help with these types of things. And again, the time that you're going to note most sediment travel and most of these things that you want to catch is during a construction process. After that, associations tend to not pay to have sand on their driveways, sand placed on their driveways. Municipalities are seldom using sand now. It's mostly salts that are being spread on the roads. So all this sand and sediment that we've seen in the past is not being utilized as much as it had been during the winter months. And of course, I can babble on about the yesterday's storm and the torrents of rain and sediment and sand and silt, regardless of the best management practices. I was driving and saw DOT construction sites where just on a huge storm event like that, there's really, I don't think, anything that you can do when you get 3 inches of rain in an hour. And that in one instance where I'm monitoring, the 3 inches of rain in an hour, that equates to, greater than a 100-year storm event, between 100 and 200 year, with the intensity of it, not necessarily the inches amount, but the intensity. Anyway, I think I've spoken too much, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might still have.
Thank you. Tracy, are you?
Well,
Or-
I have 2 more questions for Mr. Berbikas, but I don't want to hog the time. So if other people have questions they want to ask, I can come back.
Okay, is there anyone else with questions? Mr. Carey, I think we can take this down now, so thank you.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask while people are thinking. Since you mentioned salt, does the system handle salt in any way, or does that just get flushed through?
Yeah, not as far as I'm aware, your salts would likely, if it were to be removed, it would likely be through the infiltration and into the soils there. So I suspect that your first flushes, the first bit of rain that gets through the system is where your salt is going to be, and the way that this system is designed, it's designed so that that first flush infiltrates into the ground. So at best, we're likely collecting and not allowing that water to go into the wetland as it would, say, if it were flowing directly from a road or a street catch basin.
So my understanding is that salt just moves through soil. I think they both have the same charge. I think it's something like they both have a negative charge, and soil doesn't really absorb salt. Salt just moves through soil until it hits water. So is that correct? Are you aware of that, or have you heard that?
Again, I
don't know.
I imagine again that the water that would have the salt would percolate into the ground, and to what degree it gets absorbed to the soils, I don't know the answer to that. I apologize.
Okay. That's okay. I'll save that question for Mr. Danzer. I guess the next question I have, and hopefully, and then I'll let other people ask questions, is what about temperature? So there's a lot of asphalt, there's a lot of roof runoff, there's asphalt runoff, it's all getting piped in to this closed system. So how does the water that's coming out of the system, how does the system mitigate the temperature of this hot water?
Good question again. But I would, and boy, I've never never contemplated that question, specifically with this site. But again, I think when you've got your first flush, that first, in this instance, the first 1.5 inches of rain, when that water pelts down from the sky, I suspect that there's some cooling that does take place just from the water hitting the hot surface. And then as it goes into the ground, again, you've got that first 1.5 inches that would infiltrate into the ground. And beyond that, I'm not sure, what temperature-wise, how things would be after that first 1.5 inches of rain. So I think I probably didn't answer your question.
No, the reason I
tried.
asked that is I know.
I could answer it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Miletus?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Verbickas was going there. The first 1.5 inches of the rain event, the water quality volume, is being infiltrated. So I'd understand if we're going through a hydrodynamic separator and directly discharging a pipe out into the wetlands, then yes, you're not getting that cooling that you're talking about, right? So we are infiltrating that water quality volume. So it is. The larger storm events will also spill out of the level spreader and go overland through dense vegetation before it gets into that wetland system also. So you're looking at 25 to 30 feet of overland flow again through vegetation, which would do two things. One, slow it down, not create a concentrated flow, and then also provide that thermal cooling you're talking about.
So I guess that's why I asked that question, is that 25 feet enough? I know the.
I don't think there's
reason-
any science behind that, yeah.
Well, one reason I posted the Brian Murphy article was because they do address temperature
Mhm.
in that article, and
Yeah, we
they,
were taking care of that with the infiltration of the water quality.
Yeah, but that article was also talking about established forested areas and trying to maintain the buffer around those established forested areas.
and
Right
it
now,
did-
we have a condition where you have, again, I don't mean to harp on this, but grass. So if you're gonna run over grass, that's why the idea of having that established planting buffer will have that dynamic cooling before.
the article said that you needed an 80-foot established buffer, not a 22-foot buffer to cool.
So again, that
So
is
the-
talking about buffers that already are established, not talking about buffers that, again, it's site dependent, and I can point you to literature to that where it says site dependent buffers are something you need to look at, or else every wetland agency in the state would have the same established buffers, but a lot of them have different buffers based on different watersheds, based on the urbanization of different watersheds.
Well, that's right,
so-
and this is a very high density construction, so I'll save that question for Mr. Danzer. Yeah, since you don't have the literature to refer to and you're not sure.
Mm,
Anything else at this point? If not, then I think we could go to the public. And since Mr. Danzer is one of the interveners specialists, can we promote him and have him answer whatever questions you would like to answer? I think we have him now. Here we go. Okay.
Hi, for the record, this is Steve Danzer, a soil scientist, professional wetland scientist. Before I attempt to answer the questions, my understanding is that Steve Trinkus is on the line. If that's so, it might just be more efficient to put him on before I go on, if it's okay with everybody.
I don't see him.
He's the phone number. I just allowed him to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
I think it would be better right now, though, Mr. Danzer, if you could answer the most recent questions while they're fresh on our minds.
Okay, I mean, I'm more than happy. I was just thinking because I know you also had some the questions about the pollutant train with the stormwater, but in any case, all right. So I think from my understanding, there were at least two questions that were thrown my way. One was the question about salt, and I don't recollect the other question was something about
Temperature, yep.
yeah, the temperature. I think I might have missed it, but
And,
the
and
que-
excuse me, but were you the one that also submitted that document Tracy is referring to?
I'm not sure which document you are.
Tracy, you're
Referring to-
muted.
The only document that I have submitted was the 3-page comments a couple of weeks ago.
Right, I submitted the Brian Murphy document.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'll start with the question about salt. It depends upon the type of salt. I mean, there's sodium-based salts and there's calcium, magnesium based salts. Both of them have slightly nuanced differences in how they interact with the soils, but in any case, some of that salt ends up in the soil, and when there's a pulse of groundwater, they will get flushed out. In agriculture, that's always the perennial problem, is using irrigation. Water is naturally high in salts, and through the millennia, that's always been kind of the challenge with farming, is that at some point your soils become sodic, or they become just somehow with the salt too much salt, and something needs to be done. If the civilization has enough science behind it, they will flush it out. That's more modern. More ancient civilizations didn't have that knowledge, and a lot of civilizations kind of declined because of that. So in the case of this project. I would suspect that if that area is heavily salted or if there was a lot of de-icers, ultimately that will end up in the wetland. How much, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of variables that come into it, but it will dissolve. It flows with the groundwater to the extent that the groundwater infiltrates below the surface, and I mean the stormwater infiltrates below the surface and reaches the groundwater, and the groundwater eventually discharges into the stream. Some of those salt will end up in the stream. What was the question?
The second question you might not have heard was, I guess I'm trying to determine if the 25-foot buffer will be enough to mitigate changes in temperature. So I'm thinking of all this rainwater hitting the hot asphalt and roof surfaces and then getting piped into a detention system. And then I guess it has this 25-foot buffer to go through that needs to bring the temperatures back down to something that the aquatic species and the diatoms can handle. I know they're very sensitive to temperature, and this is just a lot of stormwater coming out toward the wetland, and I just want to know if that's enough of a buffer to mitigate temperature.
All right. To the extent that any of the stormwater ends up in the wetlands that does not go underground, there will absolutely, that stormwater will reflect the temperature of which it came down on. So if it's spring or fall, it's not that big of a deal. If it's in the middle of summer when it's already warm out to begin with, especially the last couple of summers that we've had where we've had 95-degree days, and to the extent that the water breaches that wetland without going underground, that could surely lead to some type of thermal impact. However, if that water goes underground, I think then the question is 25 feet enough to mitigate it? I don't really have the answer to that, but I would think that the water that would end up in the wetland or the watercourse in this case would have some mitigation, because the environment below surface is a lot cooler than the environment above surface, especially when you get down to the 2 feet, 3 feet range, and it's a fairly stable temperature as well. Whether whether it makes a difference whether it's 50 feet, 100 feet, 25 feet, that I do not know, but I would not be as concerned about that as any water that would make its way through the surface.
Thank you.
And I guess if there are any other questions.
No, did you have in mind to make a presentation, or?
I was not planning on it.
Okay.
My comments were kind of brief, and it's been at least one hearing. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I do have one brief comment about the response from Brian Carey, in that he labeled, I'm not sure if he was labeling my comments or Steve Trinkas's or just in general everybody as speculative. I kind of respectfully disagree with that. If you go back into my comments, if you just hold on one moment and I'll just, so I get this correct. He said engineering comments by Steve Trinkas noted that the proposed stormwater system would not prevent the discharge of pollutants into the wetlands and watercourse. Any pollutant loads generated by the development would not only detrimentally impact the wetlands adjacent to the site, but will also flow towards the drinking water reservoir. I still stand by those. Whether or not the pollutants are going to be discharged, I did not opine on that. What I did was I cited Steve Trinkas, who's here, who's, feel free to defend his. And, as we all know, we have 2 or 3 engineers here, and it's a question about whose testimony that the commission deems for the moment more credible. And based on that, if the commission essentially goes with Steve Trinkas's view of what's going on the site, he's kind of established that there's an impact, a chemical impact, and I just kind of elaborated on that. So by definition, that is not speculative, that's actually causal. Other than that, if anyone have any other questions? If not, I think maybe we should give Mr. Trinkus an opportunity to expound.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have Mr. Trinkus where he can speak?
He can speak. He's on mute.
Mr. Trinkus, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, Steve Trinkus for the record. I need to be very quick before another meeting. But the short answer is the pollutant loading that was done by the applicant is not correct. The value for a deep sump catch basin is 9% of total suspended solids, not 25%. The separator they propose is what's termed an online separator. And based on monitoring data from the New Hampshire Stormwater Center, online separators only remove 28% of TSS, not 90% or 80% as the manufacturer represents. And you cannot add the values together. It's also not really appropriate to say you have a load of 1 and then you're reducing it by 25%, so you have a load of 75. You actually need to calculate the pollutant loads for not only TSS, but the nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, metals, and hydrocarbons, because separators don't do anything for nutrient loading. Everything passes right through. And with online separators, it's a very poor renovation of water going into the system. Another major concern of the revised plan is now under the Caltech systems, they're putting an additional about a foot or maybe a little bit more of crushed stone under the system. There's already 6 inches, and I think they're putting maybe another foot or so. And while they're claiming a 36-inch separation to groundwater, that's from the bottom of the Caltech system. But the bottom of the practice is the crushed stone. And the crushed stone is only roughly 18 inches above the groundwater table. So it's not in compliance with the 2004 DEP manual. The 3-foot separation is from the bottom of the practice. And if you're putting a bunch of crushed stone under the Caltech, that becomes the bottom of the practice, not the Caltech unit itself. So this may not function as intended because you don't have a large enough separation to the seasonal high groundwater table. I'd like to hit on just the thermal impacts. If you can infiltrate water, you can mitigate the thermal impacts, but when the site is sitting out in the sun, as it has been, this summer when we've had some large, numerous hot days in a row, when it rains, that, the laws of thermal dynamics come into play. Then that cold rain hits the hot pavement, the heat is absorbed by the rainfall, and when it runs off, it's now got that high thermal load. If you can infiltrate it, that will mitigate it. It may not reduce it all the way, but it can, mitigate it to some degree. Regarding the chlorides, the de-icing salts are either potassium or sodium chloride, mostly sodium chloride. It's the chloride ion that's a problem. There is no treatment practice or mechanical or otherwise that will remove the chlorides. The chlorides readily move through the water, with the water, and they also bind to the soil, and they do not unbind. So the chlorides stay in the environment forever. The only way to eliminate chloride impact is simply not to put it down in the first place. So, I've done many pollutant loading analyses, and, they're not additive values. So you have to discount, if the second practice is, say, 28%, you might have to discount that by 50% and basically apply a 14% removal, because the simple reason is as you remove pollutants, it gets harder to remove remaining pollutants. Basically, as the water gets cleaner, it gets harder to remove the finer and finer stuff. That's just simple, mechanics. So you have to discount these rates, and based on doing that, you're not going to get 80% removal. The manufacturer's data is generally used with a uniform silica. In some cases, it's 20% each of 5 different gradations, which is a sand that you will never find in the real world. They're not uniform in the real world. So the lab data from the manufacturers is basically useless. I take the data from the New Hampshire Stormwater Center or the ASCE database, which is real world monitoring data. It's not in the lab. It's what happens on your parking lots and roads. If anybody has a quick question, I'll try to answer it, but I kind of have to run to my other meeting.
Well, does this system infiltrate enough to mitigate temperature?
I still have my concerns. I do not believe the soils really are that suitable for it. I still have the concerns as the infiltration practice is uphill of the area they had the fill material, that you still may be, if the water moves downhill towards the wetlands, you may be leaching stuff from that fill layer. So I haven't seen the test pits there, but from the 2 handholds I dug on the either side of the site on the adjacent neighbors' properties, I do not believe the site is suitable for infiltration.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Quick question for Mr. Trinkus before we move along? Let him. Looks like not. Okay.
All right, thank
Mr.
you.
Trinkus.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, then. I'm sorry, Alan.
Yeah, I just had a question for Mr. Danzer, actually. Maybe he could weigh in on this too. One of the concerns that I have on this project is and I've expressed it before, is the 5-foot height retaining wall around the entire perimeter of the property. Well, not the entire perimeter, but on the north and east sides, and essentially the buildings on the south side of this property. And one of the concerns I have too, with regard to the wetland, is that, we do have biota in the wetlands themselves, reptiles, amphibians, mammals that presently use the wetland. They also use the upland review area and the part of their life cycle too. And with a 5-foot wall, they're excluded from it. And that is one of the differences between this project and other projects that this, this commission has reviewed. And we've generally have had, we try to strongly discourage or have them removed when there are walls that are, to be constructed in the upland review areas or adjacent to wetlands themselves. And I was just wondering if you might be able to weigh in on that too, because that's a real concern of mine on this project.
All right. I would agree with your concerns. The only other thing to kind of consider is there is a chain link fence on the other side of the brook that separates that from the town of Ridgefield housing. And that kind of, that could kind of work either way. On one hand, that small animals such as, reptiles and amphibians, the chain link fence does not deter them. And frankly, there's a couple of ways under, but deer, the deer on one side, with the town of Ridgefield housing are going to stay on that side, but the deer that are in that corridor, if you put a retaining wall on this particular site, you've now basically corridored off a perfect corridor for deer, which is in an area that's already suffering heavily from deer predation. That's generally, I would not necessarily recommend that practice. And then on top of that, as you were saying, 5-foot wall that goes all the way down to grade. That is definitely a barrier for any type of amphibians or more likely reptiles, turtles, or anyone that just might have hazardly normally or at least accustomed to going on to the, through the upland. I would agree on that as well.
Right, because I was going to say, because I see that as a potential significant impact here. It's something that as a board on other projects, we've always discouraged or tried to eliminate. It's something that we've always looked for. And it's something that I've expressed concern on this project. And, admittedly, yes, they've this project is not attempted to address it. They've addressed a lot of stormwater issues, but we're concerned with wetlands and water courses as well. And that's one of the potential impacts that I see that can occur, is just being the blocking off this project. And as usual, I'm concerned about the precedent of what this does and other projects would do with regard to potential redevelopment of other properties, and then what recourse do we have as a board. So I agree that I thank you for your assistance with that, because basically you've answered the question. Yes, it's a negative impact.
I'm sorry, Susan, I have one more question.
Don't be sorry. This is our last chance to ask questions.
So this is for Mr. Danzer. So in your former comments, you mentioned that based on Mr. Trinkus's testimony that pollutants would still enter the water course, you recommended a larger buffer. And you also said that because the proposed activity is not minor, and more importantly, because there's an existing residence far away from the wetlands, so there is a feasible and prudent alternative to what we're looking at. It seemed implausible to you that a larger buffer couldn't be proposed. So I guess my question is that based on this new plan that you've seen, do you still feel the same way?
Yeah, I don't see any material differences between the new plan and the previous plan as far as layout. I mean, obviously there's some differences in stormwater control and some of the technical things. But I think my memo still is applicable.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I think at this point we should go then to the public. And looks like I have a couple of hands up.
I'm gonna start
Carolyn?
with, I'm gonna start with Jackie. Hers was first.
Okay, thank you.
You can talk, Jackie. Hello?
Hi. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. I was actually raising my hand because we always have a bunch of people here at Ballard Green. I live on Abbott and I usually come over here to bring my laptop so they can all watch because they're very concerned with this development.
Okay.
A lot of
Can
people-
I ask for your name and address for the record before we get
Absolutely. My name
started?
is Jackie Rostow and I live at 8 Abbott Avenue.
Okay.
And so a lot of people here are concerned with so many things. You know, I'm sure they go beyond, of course, the wetlands, but there are a lot of people here that love nature and love the wetlands. I wanted to address for myself, I keep hearing about this urbanized, heavily urbanized area in my neighborhood at Abbott Avenue. We do not live in a heavily urbanized area. I've lived here for 26 years. You know, I have had to bat away the fox and the, you know, the lions and the tigers and the bears and all this stuff. This is not New York City. This is not Norwalk. This is not Westport. This is not an urbanized area, period. The end. That's the first thing I have to say. The other thing is, hold on one second. La 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 la. You know, I think that language matters. This whole like selling of the neighborhood as an urban neighborhood. We live in Ridgefield. I moved here. Listen, I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up around density housing, which is an S-hole. It is an absolute nightmare. You do not want density housing anywhere. If you want to integrate people, integrate them into beautiful spaces, you know, lower priced homes, make the effort. Putting 14 people into less than half an acre along a wetlands area that is absolutely beautiful, that brings me all of my beautiful birdies. And what about my habitat? What about my habitat? I live in my habitat. All day long, I have beautiful nature all around me. I'm not going to go on and on. I'll let other people speak. But this is not an urbanized neighborhood or town. We don't have that. That's somewhere else. I mean, if you want to move to that, that's fine. I may move back to New York City because it's more urban. But right now, I live in suburbia in a quiet neighborhood with deer, birds, fox, squirrels, all kinds of, you know, animals driving me nuts, hummingbirds that are beautiful all over my neighborhood. This is not where a 14-unit, 3-story dumpy property with no front, no trees, no nothing. It doesn't go here. It doesn't belong in the habitat where there are wetlands, period, the end. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. And you said you had other people with you that wanted to speak?
I have another lady.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, come on, yep. Yep, you gotta be fast.
Name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Barbara Bollier. I live at 25 Gilbert Street.
Mm-hmm.
And spelling on my name? No,
If you wouldn't mind,
Beaulieu.
okay,
I believe we're all trying to be as polite as possible because the board has set that as a mode for treating this project.
thank you.
I'm gonna do my best. First, I'm just gonna say I'm furious that they're attempting to put 14 units on 0.44 of an acre. They don't have adequate parking on the street as it is. They have 14 units with 14 garages. And what are they gonna do with the second or the half of another car that they're allowed to have if any of them are affordable housing? That will then pollute that parking lot, which everything will be in, because it's gonna be a 3-story building if it's given permission, and a parking lot, that's it. That's a dangerous combination. Families don't think about what they're polluting. The applicant keeps saying that they have a permit to build. They do have a permit to build. The previous wetlands agreed that they could build a house with 3 one-bedroom units in it. And then they put in a bunch of codicils specifying that it would not be permitted to change the, the application would be null and void. I'm hoping that the wetlands already has that on record. We had a gal that would plan to present tonight, but she unfortunately is very ill and was not able to. There is documentation in planning and zoning and in the Inland Wetland Board that this occurred and that it was in 18 and 20. So I would ask that you please consider that also. They were very hesitant to give them that first permit, and that's why they were so specific about it being null and void if they tried to do anything else on the property. I think that's it for now. Thank you very, very much. What about the restoration?
Thank you for your comments. Okay, Artie,
I'm gonna promote, the next is John West.
okay, thank you.
You can talk, John.
Did you say your name and your address?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. John West. I live at 16 Abbott Avenue. I've lived in Ridgefield for what, 52 years, I think. First, as a point of interest, the land encompassing Abbott Avenue was used as a town dumping site during the 1800s. The present-day lots numbered 14 through 24 were used as the town dump during the middle of the 1800s. These sites were abandoned in the late 1800s, and the first house built on the covered land was in 1890. I do not believe any of this land was remediated or needed to be. Now, I keep hearing rhetoric from the applicant's representatives about how all the development surrounding the wetland encroaches on the 100-foot wetlands buffer, as though this sets a priority. All of these properties were developed long before the IWB existed or any wetland requirements were active. Today, there are prerequisites, and the applicant should be held to them, not 25, 50, or 75 foot, but a 100-foot buffer as requested. It's the requirement. Why anything else even being considered, get the whole project out of the buffer. Even if they build what was already approved years ago, the construction needs to be located outside the buffer as well. Their attorney's repetitive insistence that this project is good for the town and helps to remedy the chimera of housing crisis is erroneous. Basically, there is no state housing crisis. State population, for the most part, is stagnant, or in some cases declining. There is, however, a Dunkirk situation for needed pragmatic affordable housing. The formula is used to define affordable housing in small affluent towns is at best misleading and an affront to my intelligence. This project does absolutely nothing to remedy the problem at hand nor satisfy its intentions. That being said, stormwater runoff over this property can be presently observed. It gathers from itself, neighbors' side yards, and the street, and travels downhill over a thickly grassed area, ending in the wetland area to the east. This possible existing source of and other increment development, which may be causing periodical flooding downstream, is being tended to by town authorities. This condition does not need to be supplemented. When a property owner alters the existing and natural flow of water over his or her land, they are responsible for any ensuing consequences onto a neighbor's land, private or municipal. There are laws and statutes stating, and hundreds, if not thousands, of litigations confirming this assertion. The applicant has presented engineered systems that will seemingly and fully address all the issues regarding stormwater runoff arising from the proposed development of this property. Their engineers appear to be confident with their proposals. Others, also very educated people, appear to conclude the system is inadequate. All this seems to finish in an educated supposition that what will happen to and where all this stormwater goes, the engineers do not definitively know. They don't have a crystal ball. It's an educated guess. Fine. So after all the walls, grading, curbing, drainage, pipes, abatement systems, etc. are completed, when all is said and done, then what if the existing street flooding is amplified? And by the way, there are no catch basins on Abbott Avenue. Or the design disrupts runoff on neighboring properties, or creates harmful ground saturation on the neighboring side yards, or there's a failure of the system itself and it does not perform as promised now or in the future. If any of these events occur, what recourse does the public have short of spending wads of capital in litigation to correct the damage? If this all-disturbing proposal is granted approval, what airtight assurance from the owner-developer does the public receive that the final results will function as utopian as claimed? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you please state your name and address for the record? Did we lose him? Mr. Vogel now?
John.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. My name is Tom Volgino, and I live on 28 Abbott Avenue. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak and to be heard this evening, and further appreciate the board's diligent and seemingly tireless attention to the many concerned voices that have spoken over the course of the several hearings on this proposed property. While I echo the concerns that many have voiced, as you head into your deliberations, I would humbly ask that the board give consideration to the two following points. The first is the issue not of the impact of this property on the stream, about which there has been much troubling conversation, but of the stream on the neighboring properties. We have heard, and for those of us who live on this and adjacent streets, seen the impact of heavy rainfall on the stream, causing flooding and property damage, as was mentioned on the first of these hearings. With climate change, we will see these 50 and 100-year storms continue to occur with greater frequency than their names would suggest. And a property such as the one proposed will only serve to exacerbate the flooding and consequently damage to the surrounding properties, an issue that is already problematic and is as of yet, unfortunately, unmitigated. The second issue with which I would respectfully ask the board to bear in mind when making their deliberations is the issue of precedence, as Mr. Pilch commented to the same effect earlier in this call. We've heard those representing the applicant's interests make multiple references to precedents, including both that of the previously issued approval on the different proposal for this property, as well as to the approval of various other structures built in the upland wetland vicinity. We can be sure that just as there are many concerned neighbors, such as myself, who are paying close attention to these proceedings, there are certainly also just as many, shall we say, opportunists who are also eagerly awaiting the outcome of your deliberations. Should this project proceed as proposed, we can be sure that this will be one of many more efforts to replace single-family homes on half-acre lots with 14-unit or more apartment and townhouse complexes, all of which would be encouraged by and surely point to an approval of this behemoth, in spite of the many concerns addressed throughout these proceedings. I sincerely fear that the proposed project here, if approved in its current format, would be a catalyst for many additional such changes on this and other small neighborhood streets throughout our town. I again thank you for your consistent diligence through the many late hours of these sessions, and respectfully urge you to represent the greater interests of this town and not just this neighborhood in rejecting this proposal until such time as one with, if not zero, at least substantially fewer adverse impacts is brought to the table. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay, not at this time, I guess. Seems to me now that we go back to Mr. Carey to do his wrap up.
Yeah. Good evening. So we're just gonna, we're trying to put together our last rebuttal. So Andy Selmedes is gonna go first and address some of the comments that were delivered by Mr. Trinkhouse, and then I'll finish up with Jason Klein, Attorney Klein, giving the last follow-up.
Thank you.
Are we done with any questions from the commission at this point? I just want to make sure we address it all in our, I think, conclusionary statement. I think we're looking to wrap it up here. So as long as there's no any questions, we'll address whatever has been put before us at this point, and conclude our presentation.
I think we're at that point, yes.
Perfect. One of the comments was, again, the TSS removal, and how is this being achieved? Mr. Trinkhouse says, you know, New Hampshire Stormwater Center has a, you know, has some literature. Nothing was submitted, no backup to that, of in-field testing that hydrodynamic separators don't really do what the manufacturer says it does. So the manufacturer goes through testing as well, be it in the field or in the laboratory, to perform the necessary TSS removal and stormwater water quality measures that they say they produce, right? So we're here to use those methods and apply them. And what you heard was, you know, this hydrodynamic separator now doesn't work. First, it was brought to our attention to maybe incorporate this, and now that it doesn't do the job it's supposed to be doing. So I just want to pull up our stormwater report and show our treatment train and how it was done properly. This spreadsheet here does do that pollutant load, and it does exactly what Mr. Trinkhouse says. The deep sumps and catch basins with the deep sumps and hoods do 25% removal. He disagrees. He says it does 9. I will pull up literature right now that says it does 25%. 1 second. Just gotta spot between sharing screens here. This is the Massachusetts Clean Water Act. TSS removal, 25% for deep sumps catch basins. It's also part of the Connecticut Water Quality Manual. I'll bring our treatment train back up, and actually let me just jump to the downstream defender literature. Again, that does the removal as required. Here's your downstream defender. Again, this is the downstream defender. Here is their specification sheets. This is what we specified as part of a proprietary system, proven method, used throughout Connecticut, used not on residential sites, mostly on large commercial sites. Again, the 6-foot diameter that we spec'd out. The peak treatment flow is 8 CFS. 8 CFS. Our 50-year storm is 1.94 CFS. So this is where it shows you the removal of, it says 80% removal with 8 CFS. We are a quarter of that with our 50-year storm. So I just want to show that those are the proprietary systems. I'm looking for this New Hampshire Stormwater Center, trying to find where it says it only gets 28%. But what I did find on the New Hampshire Stormwater Center is that underground infiltration systems, which Mr. Trinkhouse fails to mention in his latest staff report. He only points to the deep sumps and the hydrodynamic separator. Underground infiltration systems on their own, based on the literature or the New Hampshire Stormwater Center, has 80% removal of TSS solids. That is part of the New Hampshire Stormwater Center. So even if you didn't have the deep sumps with hoods, even if you didn't have the hydrodynamic separator, you're still getting 80% removal just by the underground infiltration system. So I just wanted to point that out. And then the treatment train, I'll go back to the treatment train to show you folks how that works. We are not taking credit. As Mr. Trinkhouse said, when you get to 98%, you don't take 98%. You see here, the amount removed now is only 0.74. So this is the treatment train, and it is designed properly, and the calculations are right. Underground detention systems in Connecticut are 90% removal on their own of TSS removals. So here's you get your treatment train, and here's the calculation of 100% removal of TSS solids. The requirement is 80%. I think there was another concern regarding, let me just get here into my notes. Some of the drainage patterns I heard from some of the neighbors, the property drains west to east into the wetlands. We are not changing those drainage patterns. It still drains west to east. If it was draining on adjacent properties, maybe everybody wouldn't be in uproar about, you know, all the bad things that's happening to the wetlands based on the stormwater improvements. So I just want to pull up, I've showed this at other hearings. Maybe there's folks that weren't here at previous hearings regarding the aerial of this area and the amount of development within 100 feet of this wetland system. So here, again, this cyan line is your approximate limits of wetlands. You have the first dash line here is your 50 foot, and here is your 100 foot. And you could see the amount of development exactly, you know, directly adjacent to these properties of homes, pavements, a ton of impervious surfaces within that 100 foot and even 50 foot upland review area. So I just want to point that out of, you know, what this area, how it's been developed, where we're at in this area, and what we're looking to do. Again, I just want to share that for folks that maybe missed it, haven't had a chance to see it, but I think it is a pretty telling exhibit. And again, I just want to lastly just touch upon, it seems like we narrowed it down to 4 comments from Mr. Trinkhouse that were on this latest comment letter. So after all these revisions, all the back and forth, I think we're down to 4 comments. One of them, again, the last 2 being the snow storage. The snow storage is not shown in the lawn area between the eastern side. So let me just pull up my site plan again, so I could show you folks where the snow storage is. It is shown on our plan. It is called out on our plan. Snow removal area. It is shown on our plan. There was a big concern that it was going untreated. The snow removal again is in this area, and we have that trench drain along the top of that retaining wall, and it goes through that proper treatment again as the rest of the stormwater is going through. So that was comment number 3. And then comment number 4 was again Let me just pull it up. I didn't have these printed, I'm sorry. Oh, the double row silt fence on the north side. I think I already addressed that earlier. And it's a construction means and methods. The retaining wall will be built first with no fill placed. So the retaining wall will act as the barrier. And the silt fence is not needed at that point. So I think that addresses his latest comments. I think we addressed Mr. Verbickius's comments, and I think our proposal, in my professional opinion, meets the town of Ridgefield's drainage requirements, stormwater requirements, the 2004 Water Quality Manual, Connecticut Water Quality Manual, and also bits and pieces of the 2023 that we were asked to adhere to that's in draft form. I'm still happy to answer any questions at this point. If not, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thanks.
I do have a question. Sorry. I know I uploaded from the company that you're using, I uploaded some testing results that they had on their website that were different than the testing results that you're showing. And just for the record, I'd like for those to be seen. Caleb, I don't know if you can pull up. I think there was one from Canada.
Yes, I can pull them up.
I also sent you two from New Jersey and one from Virginia. They didn't make it on, they didn't get loaded, but I guess we can load things during the meeting so that people can see. And I'd like for you to speak to this because I may be looking at the wrong, equipment. And so it may be a confusion on my part. So I'd like clarity. So if you scroll down.
Canadian?
That's the Canadian one. I think
Okay.
the two New Jersey results would probably be more pertinent because they're closer to Connecticut. I don't know if you can pull those up.
The only ones I got from you were the Canadian.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, this is supposed to be our final rebuttal. There's not supposed to be questions and answers at this time.
Well, I did ask him to look at those when I asked the questions, and he didn't respond to that. So that means that you didn't answer my question.
Here, I'll share my screen.
That was,
Downstream Defender, the hydro.
I uploaded some from
This
their.
is what we're specifying. This is from their website,
So
directly from the
uploaded
manufacturer.
some testing results also from their website that other people did, and they loaded those results on their website. I loaded them for the record, and I would like you to look at those and explain to me what I'm
Can
seeing.
you pull them up?
Caleb had his up, and then you interrupted.
Right. Well, I'm showing here
That's not what Caleb had.
a 6-foot diameter manhole, which is what we're proposing. Treatment flow rates for 80% TSS removal.
This isn't what I asked you to respond
But
to.
you asked me to answer your question about
No.
TSS removal?
No, I asked you to
Okay.
look at the things that I uploaded on the website and explain to me what they are.
Sure. Can somebody send them to me?
Caleb, can you pull that up?
Not the Canadian one, the Jersey one, I guess.
I didn't get the other two, Tracy. I have, this is one, and then the Canadian one.
Okay, I guess the Canadian one.
And just let me know which page to go to.
They were all in that same email, so you might just have to scroll down.
Okay.
I apologize. I know
Okay.
I'm here, but if you can't find them, then I guess the Canadian one.
There's these two. There's usually cat, and then this one as well.
Okay.
This one or the other one?
I don't know. Any New Jersey one, I think, would be pertinent.
These are the two.
Can you share it?
Sorry.
I
Sure. And what page?
think you have
Is
to
this
scroll
is
down.
it this one, Tracy, or there's this one? But
Well, this one's easier because he puts it on the front page. So is this a different system or is this? So he says 50%. This is,
With the information provided in the verification appendix, is that part of that? Can we go to that page?
Do you know which page that is, Tracy?
so I just went on the website and this is what they put on their website. And so I just pulled down some of these.
Sure, I mean, I could probably answer it. If the flow is greater than what it's designed for, you're not gonna get the 80%. So that's probably what this is saying. There's different flows. If you have a large enough, they make them in different sizes. So if you have a large enough system to handle the flow, that's where you get the 98% that we're getting. So typically, yes, you get the 80%. And that's what I was going to show through this chart here, so I could show you what that looks like on my chart. And I can probably explain that with my chart now to answer your question.
At the top, it says above Dear Miss Lamont, it says TSS removal 50%.
Correct. So let me answer that. If I could share, please, Caleb.
Okay.
Yep.
This is where I was going with my answer. So here where I was showing the 6-foot diameter, and then it tells you the maximum diameter pipe that it can handle. It tells you the flow for 80%. Again, 4.25. Our flow is 1.94. And it tells you the peak treatment of 8 CFS. If you go here, this shows an example of a 4-foot downstream defender. Depending on the flow, it tells you how much percent removal you can get. So if you go across here on the 50 and then come down, the 4-foot diameter downstream defender gets 50% removal when you have over 2.5%, 2.5 CFS. So there's a chart also for this, for the 6-foot, the 8-foot, the 10-foot. So it's a curve. And then depending on the flow, the more flow, the less you're able to treat, obviously, right? It goes through the system faster. But the bigger the system, the more flow it can handle. So that's where you're getting the 50%. And that's probably what that literature says without reading all 50 pages. But that's where it says what the different stages of percentage. It's all based on the flow. Did I answer your question?
Well, I think it's difficult to say because you're saying that's probably what it says without reading it. So it's my
I mean, that's how the systems work. That's just the way they work. I mean, maybe Mr. Pilch or Mr. Verbicus, they could maybe chime in also. They probably design these systems as well.
Just one point. Yes, I do.
Yes.
Just one point. Your report says the 50-year storm was 2.78 CFS, not 1.8 CFS. And that's the flow that's going into the underground detention system, and obviously goes through the hydrodynamic separator. So I don't think you're being exactly correct in that by saying it's only 1.8.
I'm going to pull it up.
I guess what Mr. Verbicus was saying is that the company literature can say one thing, but then there's can be outside testing that might say something else. But I should let Mr. Verbicus speak to that.
Right, and NJCAT does that specific testing because groups like New York State DEC rely upon their testing in order to decide which systems are appropriate or function.
Mr. Verbicus, did you have a comment on that?
Sure. Again, the percentage removal rates vary again depending on what materials are being tested. As Mr. Trinkus had stated, that a lot of the laboratory testing that's conducted by the manufacturers have a specific, for lack of a better term, mix of sand, gravel, silt, so on and so forth, of varying sizes, and the manufacturers themselves choose what materials they feel are what they feel are representative of what their product is going to remove. And that's why third-party testing is important. And that's what we need to be looking at, not only the manufacturers, and again, some of the manufacturers have testing materials that have greater amount of fines in them. So they tend to appear to remove less or be equal to other separators, but you know, the other separators maybe seem to be on par only because the mix that they use is less fines than, you know. So again, there's really no standard across the industry. It seems that, again, third-party testing is what you want to look to. What the manufacturer provides is a great guideline. And as far as the removal rates, what Mr. Similides was showing on the company literature, it shows exactly how that particular product works. And you know, basically they've got a curve of how it works. And I guess to simplify it, the less flow you've got going through the unit, the more of the suspended sediments are going to be settled out. That's because they're traveling a little bit slower and they are more apt to fall out. There's, you know, not being, I guess, carried as vigorously as you would when you've got a larger flow. And then as shown on that chart that Mr. Similides was sharing, the greater the amount of water, the greater the velocity, the less efficient those units become. So looking at the chart and looking at, you know, what each product can do, it seems that for this particular instance, the product specified was based on the curve values provided in the literature provided by the manufacturer. So attempting to be as conservative as possible with the design. And again, third-party testing is always imperative. I always, well, now going way back in time, in the late 90s, early thousands, I was always pushing for third party. Would only use products that had third party testing, and that seems to give a fair shake. And again, the resources that are available that people are looking at, you've got your New Jersey DOT, New York State DOT, the University of New Hampshire. A whole bunch of places are testing these and they're finding different results, but again, I think that these products that are being utilized and proposed are certainly going in the right direction, trying to protect the resources that we all need to survive with. So again, the removal rates, so long as we're striving to get as close to 100%, I think the better served we all are. And to that end, again, you can only use what the manufacturer provides and what's been backed by third-party testing for the products that you choose.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not even sure that I understand what I just said. But I think I meant to be clear.
Okay. Are there any further questions at this point, or should we go to the applicants'
Brian, you want to go next?
comments? And then after that, if there are any final questions before we end, then we'll take those.
I just have one question for Mr. and Brian, you're on mute. Mr. Verbickas, in your professional opinion, the design meets the requirements?
It appears that the design meets the requirements of the wetland regulations. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Carey.
Yeah, I just wanted to address some final comments and kind of bring us back to where we began. So the project team began working on this project in September 2022 with the applicant as part of the design process. Before the design process, we started by performing quite an extensive amount of due diligence to make sure that the project fit on the site and that there was feasible and prudent alternatives that have been presented that are protective of wetlands. I think we've submitted substantial evidence into the record that shows that the project can be built in a manner that is protective of wetlands and that does maintain the existing functions and values of the wetlands that have been identified through the evidence we've submitted into the record. Some of the questions that were brought up tonight were regarding the construction of a wall around the site and how that would impact the movement of basically salamanders and other reptiles. We have found no evidence on site that there's any habitat that would be supportive of any threatened or endangered species, or even species that would be utilizing the site coming off the wetland that would use the existing turf grass monoculture that exists for any type of breeding or wildlife benefit. Let's be honest, the property is a single family residential house that has grass from the backyard all the way down, it clear cut to the edge of the property where the wetland basically begins. The project aims to increase the biodiversity of the existing site while maintaining the upper portion of the property for development that is in the wishes of the applicant. Just so I can share my screen, there was some discussions about the area not being urbanized. So just to go back, the area is serviced by both city sewer and city water. Areas that are non-urbanized are not serviced by a municipal city sewer or water. This is not farmland. This is not forested area. It's not Class A drinking water watershed. It's an area that is directly downtown, adjacent to downtown Ridgefield, where you can see areas that are almost 100% impervious, including areas that are owned by the town, where you have the existing Ridgefield Housing Authority. You can see that the site to the south is almost 100% impervious. We've done everything through our process of development to make sure that we are bringing a project, while dense, is protective of the wetland. There are no, just to back up real quick, to bring this down a little bit, the site is serviced with sanitary sewer and municipal water. There are no wetlands or water courses existing on site. The regulated area is limited to areas that are off-site. I think we've entered substantial evidence into the record to show that the 22-foot buffer, which will be heavily planted, will be a benefit to the adjacent wetland, and is a benefit, and it provides more of an ecological benefit than the surrounding properties do. The property is not located in the FEMA floodway, and it is not located in the flood zone or the FEMA floodway. And the bottom line is there already is an approval to build a development on the property. So I think through all of the evidence and the professional opinions that Land Tech and the project team have provided to the commission and to the public, we've provided a project through multiple alternatives where we have established a highest and best alternative that was presented based on the most recently updated site plans. And we've entered substantial evidence into the record showing that there will be no impacts to the adjacent wetland or water course. And that being said, I know that Jay Klein just wanted to discuss some criterion that the commission had to, that has to consider as part of their decision-making process. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Brian. Thank you, Andy. And again, thanks to everyone who's here with us tonight and has hung in there with us throughout the course of this summer. I think, when was our first meeting? In June or late May? I can't recall the date, but I remember we started that meeting by saying the wetland board's job is guided by section 10.2 of your regulations. Those are the factors that when this hearing concludes, and whether we continue on this evening or come back in a couple of weeks or 35 days, whatever the case may be, those are the factors that will guide your analysis. And I think it's imperative that we close with those, given their import. The first standard is the environmental impact on the proposed, on the regulated area. And the analysis, not just by Mr. Carey, not just by Mr. Sumalides, but by Mr. Verbicus and the Southwest Conservation District, all indicate that there's no anticipated environmental impact to the offsite wetland. We've heard this evening, and we see on our screens right now, there are no BMPs on the property today. It's just lawn, and the property today has low. I'm reading something here. Low biological value with a very low diversity of plant species. Those aren't my words. Those aren't Brian Carey's words. Those aren't Andy Sumalides' words. Those are the words from the Southwest Conservation District's analysis. The town's independent expert, one of the town's independent experts in this project. This property is just to the north of a 6-unit multifamily project that was approved, or at least when I go on the tax assessor's website, it says the building that's closer to the wetland area than we are, or we're proposing, says it was built in the year 2000. So, Brian, we can see your email. So if you want to minimize your screen, yeah, let's keep this up. Thanks. I presume that received some sort of wetland approval. So that was well after the wetland regs were put in place. They're the condominiums at 36 Gatuna Street, and our friends who we heard from at the Housing Authority development, not to mention the downtown that we're a stone's throw away from. I don't think that the word urbanized is and when we use it, we don't mean that in a pejorative, and I don't think that word is pejorative in any sense of the word, in the way. This is a developed neighborhood. Again, to quote the Southwest Conservation District, this is a densely developed neighborhood with uses, again, quoting, directly adjacent to the wetland area with little buffer. We are not proposing a development that's directly adjacent to the wetland. We are not proposing a minimal buffer. We're proposing, quite frankly, something that will introduce several best management practices that many of our neighbors lack and do not have. And as Andy said a couple of nights ago, and I think he said it this evening, there's thousands and thousands of square feet of impervious coverage within this upland area, and we're within 500 within the 50-foot area. We're adding 500 square feet to tens of thousands of existing coverage. I find it hard to believe that de minimis addition is the straw that's going to break the wetlands back. And we respect, and I mean this sincerely. I know we're disagreeing with our neighbors, and these hearings are they're emotional, they're personal. I get it, and I do not dismiss that in the least bit. Please understand that, folks who are in the chat here. But there's just not substantial evidence that shows that there will be an adverse impact to these wetland areas. We've heard speculation about the potential impact on wildlife. Again, no one's pointed to something that says, hey, this animal, if this animal is adversely impacted, here's the directed adverse impact on the wetland area itself. No one's pointed to that. So, and that is the standard in Connecticut. That I didn't make it up. That's something that Connecticut courts have enunciated. But if animals are your concern, again, I go back to the Conservation District's analysis. They recognize that our planted area represents a significant enhancement of plant species and diversity and experience for wildlife. I mean, again, I don't have the credentials of Brian or Andy or Mr. Verbicus, but the grass compared to the buffer that we're proposing, it almost speaks for itself, and it's recognized by the town's independent expert. And you heard this evening from Mr. Verbicus too, just a few moments ago, saying that this proposal meets the wetland criteria. Didn't hesitate, he had to unmute his microphone, but didn't hesitate. Didn't mention an environmental hesitation there. Again, I would harken back to the July 12th meeting where Chris Sullivan of the SWC concluded in his review by noting that he wasn't opposed to the project, and that the proposed plantings will result in better water leaving the lot. Folks, these are independent, unbiased experts who the town has entrusted to review this proposal. So let's trust the experts. Let's trust the science. The project's not going to have an adverse environmental impact. It's just not. Now, there is a petition that's in the record under statute 22A-19. And in order to be to successfully meet their burden, the petitioners have to show that there's unreasonable harm to the environment. As I just said, that's just not the case here. And you don't have to believe us. You can believe the experts that the town employed. The next factor is whether there's a feasible and prudent alternative, considering the basic objectives of the proposal. Now, both state law and your regulations define a feasible alternative as one being constructed and implemented consistent with sound engineering principles. I think it's the next word, prudent, that really informs what I take away from these. Prudent is defined as an economically and otherwise reasonable in light of the social benefits to be derived from the proposed regulated activity. And you can consider cost, but that's not the only factor that's important. These definitions capture the careful balance that's inherent to your job as wetland board or as volunteers and serving your community on this wetland board, and inherent in the Wetland Act here in the state of Connecticut itself. It's a balance between providing necessary protections while allowing for the pursuit of social benefits that can be achieved through smart planning and careful development. And we've struck that balance. I should note that while our engineering and environmental experts stand by our original design, we have incorporated several alternatives with the input of Mr. Verbickus and others. And I think Brian and Andy did a great job of summarizing those. And I don't think we need to beat that any further, but we can turn the microphone back to them if you'd like. And we're happy to have had that collaboration with the town, because that's how these projects become what they're supposed to be, right? That's how they become better. And I think we've incorporated those features. At the same time, while providing the necessary protections for the offsite wetland, this project provides a significant societal benefit in the form of desperately needed housing opportunities. I'm going to respectfully disagree with some of our neighbors who spoke earlier this evening, who questioned the need for housing. Respectfully disagree with them. The proposal that we have before you all tonight calls for the construction of 14 townhomes. We're not talking about, and I don't have a problem with mid-rise apartments or high-rise apartments, but that's not what we're talking about, right? These are 14 townhomes in a really terrific spot for them. Now, if there was, which there's not, some 100-foot setback from the upland review area, or from the wetland, excuse me, if that was a no-build zone, and there's nothing in the regulations that says as much, that would force the construction, right, of a mid-rise or a high-rise apartment, I suppose, in the alternative that Andy or Brian showed on our screens a moment ago. But as your own experts have said on the record, after carefully reviewing this proposal, Mr. Verbickus, I'm sorry, I hope we didn't ruin your summer having to review all our materials here. But after that review, there was no adverse environmental impact found that would result from this project. So it would be imprudent to force construction of apartment building entirely outside of the setback area when that's not needed to protect the offsite wetland. We can protect the wetlands, and we can build, quite frankly, I think 14 attractive and 14 needed homes. 3 of the homes, and these are estimated rentals because these rents are guided by state statute, some of the rents by state statute and by median income at the time of CO issuance. If these homes were available today, 3 of the apartments, monthly rental before a utility deduction would be $1,600 a month. 2 of the apartments would be about $2,000 a month. And the remainder of the apartments would be market rate. Today, if you want to rent an apartment, if I wanted to move to Ridgefield, and don't worry, friends in the chat, I'm not gonna do that to you, but if I wanted to move to Ridgefield and find a rental, I have 13 choices in the entire town. There are 13 places that I could rent today. That's not enough, folks. That's not enough. And the average rental for those homes, and this is an average, this is a midpoint, $3,800 a month. We need homes, folks. Teachers need homes, blue collar folks, young professionals, people starting their lives or retirees who just want to stay in the community they've dug their roots into. They want the same opportunity that the folks at the housing authority property have, right? To have an affordable place to stay in Ridgefield, perhaps. They just want that same opportunity. So given the fact that evidence concerning harm to the wetlands is, as Brian said, there is some speculation here. We say that respectfully. And given the testimony, not just from our experts, but the town's experts, there's no need for any further protection. We've covered the environmental side of this. Let's do something about making Connecticut and this community a place that everyone can afford to call home. I mean, it would be imprudent to provide additional unneeded protections to the wetlands that would impact the ability to deliver housing that is needed. And again, another point of respectful disagreement with the neighbors on that, and that's fine. The third factor is the relationship between short-term and long-term impacts of the proposed regulated activity. We have provided plans, that detail the construction measures that will employ, the Coltech chambers that'll be there, the sumps, the hydro swirl that Mr. Verbickas recommended, and it won't just be installation and see you later. We provided you all in the record with operations and management plans, an invasive species management plan, and as a condition of approval, I hope that you require us to abide by those documents, because you should hold us to that standard, quite frankly, and we'll hold ourselves to that standard. That's something that we're committed to do. The fourth factor is the irreversible and irretrievable loss of wetlands. Again, we're talking about adding 500 square feet of impervious coverage in an area where there's 20,000 square feet of existing, and I'm using round numbers here. I forget Andy's the math guy. I'm just a dumb lawyer. But folks, it's just difficult to imagine how that impervious surface increase, that insubstantial surface increase, that's fully treated and fully vetted by an independently endorsed stormwater system, will somehow lead to an irretrievable or an irreversible loss of the wetlands. I mean, think about it. Those are strong words. Those are strong words. Rather than foreclosing the ability to protect wetlands in the future, I think, to be quite honest, this is showing away how a smart way to do this type of project. I see a lot of projects where it's dozens or more apartments, right? There's not a lot of 12, 14, 15, less than 20 proposals. This is a unique opportunity to really do something special for the community, and I think that's worth noting. Fifth factor, injury or interference with safety or other reasonable use of property. There's Andy, I think, spoke very eloquently about the reduction in storm situations. And while it's not necessarily in this factor, I want to say before it leaves my head, while animals, the animal standard we discussed, just because we're going to have a wall in some portions of our property, that doesn't stop them from animals traversing up and down other properties. That this isn't, we're not gating off the entire wetland area. So while that wouldn't be enough to deny the application, I think that's important to mention. The sixth factor is impact on wetland resources outside of the area for which the activity is proposed. Again, this wasn't something flagged as a concern by any of the independent experts who were asked to review the application. If we're not impacting the adjacent wetland, again, it's hard to speculate how we'd be impacting wetlands further afield from our site. And then the last factor is any additional measures that would help mitigate an impact. And I won't go through the additional measures that we've employed throughout this process throughout this summer. I'll just say that again, we appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with our neighbors, collaborate with the town, and incorporate. We stand by our work. Our experts stand by their work, but we don't take pride in authorship. If someone has a good idea, we're happy to take it and incorporate it into our proposal, and we've done that in many ways. So, again, I think that's a strength of this application and a credit, quite frankly, to a process that, while difficult, is necessary. This idea that it's protect the environment or approve the project, that's a false choice. It's not an either or here. It's not an either or. It's a both and. We can protect the environment and we can provide housing that we need. We can do both. And I think that in approving this project, you all will be sending a powerful message that, yes, we can achieve that. And we look forward, quite frankly, to this being something, a point of pride, really not just for the folks on Abbott Avenue, but for the greater community at large. thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klein. Is there anything further from the board before we close the public hearing? Further questions? We think we have everything in the record we need?
We could stay till midnight, I suppose, right?
No, I'm just trying to be sure that we have whatever it is we need, that there's nothing else, and Carson? You're, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So there were some things that came in today that I have not had a chance to review. So I have not had the opportunity to formulate questions on those. I'm not sure there's anything we can really do about that at this point. We can talk about it in our deliberations, I suppose, but I just wanted to point that out for the record that there are some things that are in the record that I think at least myself and probably some other board members haven't had a chance to look at. I don't know if they're important or not, or exactly what the details are, but I guess that's the point.
Right. Mr. Klein?
Yeah, no, I think that's a terrific point, Mr. Fincham. And, we work as quickly as we can, just as I know, Mr. Verbickas, gave us his comments as quickly as, and you all, want to be informed in your decision. It's my experience that to the extent there are questions, those can be, well, we're not allowed to discuss this, obviously, Mr. Fincham. Questions can be funneled to us through your staff who, poor Artie and everyone else, they probably don't want to hear any more from us, but, that's a way to transmit questions to the extent there are any.
Great, thank you.
Okay, then. I guess we're at the point where I say hearing nothing further. Public hearing is closed. I want to thank everybody for their diligence, perseverance. And given that it's now 9:45, I think with the hour being late that we will put off our discussion, the beginning of our discussion until our next meeting, which is September 28th. Okay, well, thank you. I think we have some minutes to approve before we close tonight.
So, sorry, just another point of order, Ms. Baker, and might be my lack of familiarity with your procedures. Do you all need a motion to close the hearing, or is just announcing sorry to be that jerk with the Roberts Rules of Order, but however you do it, just want to make sure it's done correctly.
Artie?
We don't need a motion.
I didn't think so. No, I guess we're set. I don't have a gavel. I guess it wouldn't do so much good here in my living room.
This is Kirk Carr, on the record. Thank you for watching.